Hey guys, today in the podcast had SCP Archives. SCP Archives does dramatic and highly produced retellings of SCP articles. If you guys enjoyed the podcast, make sure you review us or follow us. The more you guys help me out means the more I can put into the podcast. Thanks. Enjoy.
Don't forget, today is pizza day. So head on down to the cafeteria to grab yourself a hot slice.
Welcome, Pacific, to the SCP podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
For people who aren't familiar, what do you do? What's SCP Archives all about?
Oh man, isn't that the question? So SCP Archives is, as true as can be, a faithful recreation of all of your favorite SCP stories, tales, and entries. So we take tales straight from the wiki, and entries straight from the wiki, give them a narrator, give them a full cast, and a bunch of sound design, some music, and after generally a month of production, you have an episode full of immersive stuff. Basically, a movie without the visuals.
Yeah. I will say it's probably one of the most highly produced podcasts / ratings I've stumbled into. So,
thanks, I appreciate that. Yeah, I've been podcasting for a while, so it was kind of an easy transition to go from one horror audio project into another, and SCP ended up being the next big thing I was working on, and yeah.
Well, so as tradition on the podcast, how'd you find out about SCP?
Oh man, so this takes me back. It was probably when I was in high school back in like 2013. Okay. But I was into like creepy stuff and like conspiracies, and I can't even remember who. But one of my friends was like, "Oh, have you ever heard about SCP?" And it's like, I haven't. And then I proceeded to like get really into it, read a bunch of articles. I want to say around then it was like only up to like the 3000s or so.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Got super duper into it. And then like my senior year of high school, going to like my freshman year of college, I just kind of like fell off of
same.
it for a while. Once in a while, like I'd see something pop up, I'd read it and go like, oh, that's cool. But it wasn't until one of my podcast friends, John Grills, who runs Creepy, which is another horror creepypasta podcast. He was like, "Hey, let's do an SCP podcast," because he had a lot of success translating creepypastas into audio drama, and he was like, "Yeah, let's do this." I pitched it to Bloody Disgusting, which was our parent company, and I think I probably spent another like 6 months just kind of sitting on the idea, like reading entries. It's like, yeah, I don't know how to do this. Like, should we just like convert them? Should we do something original in the universe? And yeah, I think after, like I said, about 6 months, he emailed me again. He was like, so I recorded one, and I think it was 087 was the first one he recorded. So I listened to it. I was like, yeah, okay, I think I know what we can do with this. And I think, like 2 or 3 months later, we launched the show.
Cool.
Yeah, so
rest is history.
Exactly. So yeah, like coming back to SCP Archives, a lot of this has been like a bit of a catch up. Like, now I'm going back, like rereading some of the old articles I missed. All the new articles, of course. 5000 just launched last year, so I've been trying and probably failing to like keep up with that one too.
I'm in the same boat, don't worry.
Oh man, it's so many new articles were written every day. I just cannot keep up.
I tend to just take the approach of I let the authors and the wiki users kind of sort through the stories that are worth kind of spending time on, and the others that are
find out kind of which ones come on top. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. But
yeah,
do you have any like specific favorite SCPs that are like, man, I really gotta turn these into some sort of production?
It is my dream to do SCP-3999, Researcher Talleyrand's break from reality, I guess, is what you could call it. For those who might not know SCP-3999, basically half the article is crossed out and the other half is kind of ramblings. It is like a personified writer's block. So as you read through the article, Researcher Talleyrand, who's in charge of it, is, brainstorming like what makes a good article, and he's going through and he's like, yeah, what if SCP-3999 is Euclid? No, cross that out. Keter? No, cross that out. Thaumiel? No, cross that out.
Yeah.
Back to Euclid. Like, you can kind of see how the whole article evolves, and it's super duper fun. I have no idea how to translate that to audio, but I've been...
Yeah, I was going to say.
Right, I've been kind of like, picking away at it over the course of the last year, just like, well, maybe we could do this, do that. I'm... No promises. It'll probably come out with Season 3 at some point.
Okay, all right. You heard it here.
Yeah, you heard it here.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure at all. Aside from like 3999, a good exploration log is always my jam. Like, it's obviously the easiest to like convert into audio, so it's good on like the, like business side of like creating it. But I just really like reading longer articles that are like fleshed out and have like really cool exploration logs or, found footage. Oh God, I'm forgetting the number, but the Bone Orchard is a really fun article about a facility that gets overtaken by the flesh that hates and the whole Sarctic gods and everything. But yeah, basically some MTF teams get sent in and see a bunch of weird bone trees that have like bloody leaves and stuff, and it's just this really pretty but also like very horrifying and disgusting story. And that also like on my top list of like next articles to try and do.
I definitely really appreciate the more cosmic horror-esque or like natural kind of forces, and less of like he's an evil monster kind of thing.
Definitely. And on that note, like I think one of my new favorite articles would be I'm also forgetting the number. It's a 5,000. But Lamplight, where the entire city is like at the edge of the known universe or at the known galaxy, just kind of suspended in eternal darkness.
Actually, I haven't read that one.
Let me find the number. It is so cool. I believe it was one of the 5,000 contest entries. 5005. It's this wonderful, really beautiful story. It's oddly peaceful and kind of quiet in, an otherwise kind of chaotic and loud SCP universe. Like I said, it's all about this researcher going to this city at the edge of the known universe, and past it, it's kind of like a point of no return. Like past it, the galaxy is dark and endless, and this is kind of like the last bastion. Of course, being a city that only has one source of light kind of suspended above it, a lot of people who go there are artists and poets and whatnot. And a lot of them are very, very depressed because they, wind up in this town surrounded by pitch black nothingness, and they just kind of stare into the abyss. And sometimes, very often, they will walk into that abyss and forever disappear. It's just such a beautiful piece and absolutely worth your reading. Very cosmic nihilism, if you're into that kind of reading too.
I do. It's very vaguely. I just started reading. Do you know Hyperion?
Yes.
So I finally just started trying to get into the older classics, and it just kind of, that story kind of reminds me loosely of, for people who don't know Hyperion, it's basically this planet. Again, it's kind of on the I'm still only like a chapter in, so give me. I'm still learning
at the beginning.
But
yeah.
from my understanding, it's basically this like very distant planet that's like disconnected, because basically in this universe they have all these portals, and that's how they travel between planets. But this planet, you can only get there through actual spaceship flight. And there's a region in this planet in the north where this like godlike being lives, and it's basically point of no return. Like you have to journey there on foot, and no one has ever returned. But basically this like religious order or government basically picks these random seemingly random people to like I think 6 voyagers to essentially explore this region of Hyperion. And I got to the part with the priest where he was kind of telling the story of this bishop who was excommunicated and put onto this planet. And there's just like weird feeling of just like being on the kind of culture and the people and the world that kind of exists when you're on the edge of the universe of the known galaxy. It's a very fun setting. I really enjoy that.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like I said, kind of like peaceful in the otherwise kind of chaotic world. It's nice when you like stumble across these articles that are just so different in tone and like idea and execution than anything else on the wiki.
Yeah. I've been finding I kind of originally like I've only read probably the first 2,000 and then random bits of 3,000 and then random bits of 4 and 5. But I've been finding more so with 4 and 5,000, it's kind of had these nicer more refreshing takes. Like I feel like it just keeps expanding what falls underneath the umbrella of like the SCP universe, which I really, really enjoy.
So on that note, I actually have a question for you. As you read some of the newer series and having read a lot of the older ones, is there a series that you can kind of like point at and say like this is my favorite overall?
So far, so a lot of my favorites do come from the 3000 series. Now I'm thinking about it. Like I really love.
Interesting.
I really love. I just had Tanhoney on recently, so he did 5000. Yeah, I really love his Garfield one. I really like that. Like,
oh my god!
comedy.
Yes, the Garfield.
I just love like dark comedy, and the fact that he mixed the Garfield, like a real Garfield comic strip, into the actual article. Right. Things like that. I mean, I'm working on 3000 right now. I'm doing an animated short film for that. I'm horrible with numbers. That's like one of my worst things. Yeah. But there are other 3000 ones I definitely do enjoy a lot.
Definitely. I don't know if you do the same, but like obviously like I go through like the Tales Hub for each entry, because if there's like a relevant like short story about an SCP, I generally try to incorporate that. So a lot of what I see is like number and then like the name. So we did 3333, the tower, and like that helps me remember them a little bit more, just having like the little names like oh god, Lord Stonefish's
Dada?
Reagan cut up.
Oh, that one.
Sorry,
yeah, I know the Reagan one. Yeah.
Or is that Lord Stonefish? That might be someone else.
A cactus is that?
Right, but like I
get mixed up all the time.
Yep. I know. So many authors and everything. Well, and then there's also so many like crossovers, like Wade Diaz, who is probably one of my favorite like newer. He's not new per se, but like newer authors. I know he just worked on. I think it was 5999 ended up being its official designation. It's 7 candles. It's a super creepy story about. It's a little meta too, but God, I don't know if I can really talk about what it's about without like spoiling some of the hooks of it.
Yeah, I'll say. Read that one. I haven't read that one actually.
Yes, read that one. Yeah, it's really cool. It's I believe it's Cactus and Wade and I think 1 or 2 other people. Yeah, but to my earlier question, lately I've really been enjoying a lot of the 4000, especially like the later 4000, like so far early 5000 series. I think there's kind of a tonal shift coming across, just as culture and everything else around us changes, so too is the wiki. And lately, like, I've been having all these like brain itches scratched by like new entries.
I know some people, kind of like the older guard on the wiki, were kind of complaining that the 5,000 series and also 5,000 article were too tale-like.
They definitely are.
I personally enjoy that though. More.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not crazy about the super clinical articles like as a personal taste.
There's definitely like a time and a place for them. Like, I think probably the most successful execution of that kind of clinical style is what's his name? Corporal Alexei. It's let's see if I can find the number real quick. I feel like this is gonna be an episode of a lot of like Googling article names.
Yeah, that's everyone. Don't worry.
But it's this wonderful story. I want to say in the 2000 series about a Russian soldier from another dimension where, there's been like all-out nuclear warfare, and humanity has discovered these kind of like mole-like people living beneath the earth. So the soldier gets transported here from, like I said, another dimension, and he has this kind of chitinous living armor surgically attached to him. And, the whole article is about the researcher assigned to him, who I'm also forgetting the name of, taking a very human approach and, like comforting this soldier who now lives in a world without a war, far from his home and his friends, and like helping this soldier, through PTSD. And this article exists in a broken masquerade, so eventually, the SCP is made public, and the Russian soldier, among with a lot of other like, Euclid humanoid entities, are released. And the article follows him after he's released from Foundation custody, as he like becomes a member of the Broken God Church, and he rises through the ranks and becomes a priest. And it tells this really beautiful, poignant story about like just a little humanity that the Foundation showed once, and how it like helped reform this man's life, and how he, was able to grow old and die peacefully in a nice, quiet monastery in, rural Russia.
Yeah, it's not often you see like an actual character arc in the SCP universe. I mean, obviously ignoring the tales.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is so many of these I've read years ago. I can't even remember half of them.
Right. Yeah. They
is that part of the article, like the broken?
Yeah. The entire thing's in article. It's not even a related tale, if I'm recalling it correctly. Because like I said, it follows Broken Masquerade. So it's. He becomes a POI after he's released, so there's just like a few occasional updates. Apparently he was like trying to mail letters to the old doctor, like thanking him for like helping out. And yeah, just it's beautiful pieces. It is SCP-2273, Major Alexei Belatrov.
I'm gonna reread that one.
Yeah, like I said, super beautiful article, and kind of to your point, like it's rare getting like those longer tales or tale-like entries in some of the older SCPs, especially. But look at the winner for the 5,000 contest. It's Y, which is written in. It's basically a super elongated tale. It's the point of view of a character traveling through this terrifying broken world. And yeah, there's some tables, but like really, it's all the story of I've forgotten his name, but the story of the guy in the exclusion suit, journeying through the scarred earth.
It's also, I mean, people call it like the Avengers of the SCP universe. It's kind of been like
very much like, so.
I know for a while fans have always kind of wanted. I mean, there are multiple other articles that kind of do mashups, but I don't think any do it on like this level.
Right. And I mean, you have to look at SCP as a whole. It is very clinical, but it is also storytelling, it is horror, it is comedy, and it's absurd and cosmic at times. Like you have entries like Clarky the Clown, which is I think at 2000, which is just like a kids show clown that like tells you to kill your parents.
Oh wait, I thought that was 99. Was that Bob the Clown, or is there two different ones? There's multiple clown SCPs. I know that.
Oh no, sorry, you're right. I am thinking of Bobble. Clarky the Clown is part of the Circus of Darkness. Oh man. I'm destroying my credibility as an SCP reader.
No, don't worry.
Yes, Clarky the Clown is... Oh, I didn't put... Oh, that's my cat outside. He desperately wants in. Atlas, do you want to come in? He doesn't want to come into the studio. He just wants to meow at me. He was playing with our other cat and is very upset that he's been locked in the basement because he was playing too rough. So here he is. Yeah. He's a little baby. Well, I guess he's 2 years now, so he's not a super duper baby. But he's much younger than our older cat, who is 7 and very large and fat and tired all the time. So yeah, it's really an unstoppable force and an unmovable object.
Man.
Yeah.
That's cute though.
Right.
I definitely miss having a pet. But anyways.
Yes, back to the topics at hand. Gosh, where were we? Yeah, Clarky the Clown. Circus of Shadows. I don't know. It's a bunch of killer clowns. Clarky is one of the weird clowns who is not a killer. And they get scooped up by the Foundation, and the entire time they're talking to the interviewer, and they're scared that their older brother, an evil clown, is going to come and kill them. And of course the story ends with the evil clown also being scooped up by the Foundation and having a confrontation with Clarky, the not so evil clown.
That's the one where they're all like weird shapes, like one's like a ball, and I think that's the one.
I believe so.
That's a pretty cool one. Definitely recommend that one.
Right. But yeah, all that to say, like, the SCP universe is so expansive and so wide that, like, of course you're gonna get tales that are more story-centric or more hilarious and weird. And occasionally you'll get tales like SCP-1730, which is long. So very long.
Yeah, I actually haven't really dabbled much in the rewrites or expansion ones. That is like a rewrite of 173. Right?
No, it's
wait. I don't know. Oh my god.
You're so good.
My brain interpreted it as 173 hyphens.
No, it's what happened to Site 13.
Oh, duh, yes.
Yeah.
I literally read that one.
Yeah. No, we're currently doing a an audio adaptation of 1730.
Awesome.
Yeah, and we've broken up into this 4-part script, and it's going to be what we air season 3 with. So March 9th, first episode is going to be part 1 of 1730. Because fun fact, that tale is like 2 hours long, because it has like 20 exploration logs and like, wow. I ended up condensing some of the characters because a lot of them were like 1 or 2 liners, but I think we still have a cast of about 34 people.
Wow.
Which is
that's crazy.
Bonkers.
Yeah.
Right? I think our next biggest article might be I can't even like maybe 3333, but that only had like 8 or 9 characters in it, It's been a strange jump from a relatively small cast to basically like an all hands on deck production.
I mean, what's that like? So a lot of other people don't really know, but a lot of the other creators I've talked to, they tend to be like a very small team, and that's it. It's not like you're not working with all these different actors and things like that. So like, especially from a podcast perspective, what's it like working with so many different voice actors?
Yeah. Honestly, pretty easy. So, like I said, I've been doing podcasting for a while. I think I'm coming up on 5 years this summer. And my first audio drama, Lake Clarity, was me and 5 friends in our studio on campus recording lines, and it was terrible. And it was many years ago. And people still listen to it. Every once in a while I get like a ping of like, oh, you got X number of new downloads. But that was a very hands-on kind of engaged thing. And SCP is very different for 2 main reasons. One, it's all remote, which this ended up being a happy accident because very early on, we wanted to work with a lot of the actors that I'd met through the Fiction podcast community. And a lot of them live in New York or LA, and a few of them live in like London, and we have like one down in Florida, one up in Chicago. They're all kind of scattered about. So we kind of set out with the intention of setting them up for remote recordings. Everyone had their own home studios, and being in the podcast community. Especially in the fiction podcast community, almost everyone else has day jobs. So we basically gave them the script. We gave them, their roles and some very light direction. And we just said like, hey, the nice thing about SCP is your character's going to die, and or never be seen from again. So like, you can kind of get crazy with the character. If you want to try out a new accent, if you want to try a new tone or character or anything else, just go for it. And we gave our actors a lot of trust because at no point did they interact with one another. It was just like, hey, you 5 strangers. Oftentimes actors wouldn't even know who they were acting against until the episode came out.
Interesting.
Because we'd send them the script and say like, hey, here's your deadline and good luck. And it, very fortunately worked out. We have a lot of very, very talented actors who are able to just take that and run. And because it's an anthology, because, there is a lot of creative freedom, and because, we have the archetypes of like, oh, here's the SCP soldier who's like gruff, and the SCP soldier who's funny, and here's like the researcher who's like very cold and clinical. Those were very easy archetypes to kind of play with and mesh with and mold. But yeah, so for our first 2 seasons, actors were totally just kind of disconnected and isolated in their own. So, when COVID hit, we were actually largely unaffected by it because, aside from a few actors who we would record with locally, like all of our actors had home setups. So yeah, we just, rolled with it and kept going.
How convenient.
Yes, very much so. For season 3 and for some of our projects going forward outside of SCP, we were taking a little bit more of a hands-on approach. Just first allowing actors to actually listen to everyone else's audio. So we have like big old drop boxes full of just everyone's audio, so you can kind of like listen, hear what intonation they're going for and whatnot. But ultimately, a lot of the continuity between characters lands on me. So as I'm going through and as I'm editing, if there's like a line that just doesn't sound quite right in response to another line, or an accent that feels a little mishmash, usually that's when I'll like reach out to an actor and say like, oh, hey, like, can you redo this bit or redo that bit? But that's happened so few times that, we've been very fortunate not to have to like do huge retakes of like tons of episodes.
I come from a film background, and
right.
My gut reaction would be like, oh, I'm sure you guys are doing table reads and yada yada. It's interesting to see how remote you guys can do and still get a pretty solid production off the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, for all of my early productions, like that's the only way I knew how to do it. So it, like I said, it was very jarring and different to like, come into this world and be like, well, good luck, actors. I'll see you in a week.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, no, it's very different. But I think that really just speaks to the talent of everyone we have on the cast and crew, that they are able to just be so gosh dang awesome, you know? Like, really just, you know, they're picking up the ball, and they'll come to me as like, hey, you know, like, I want to try out this voice or this accent, or how's this word pronounced? But aside from that, like, it really is just the actors' own natural intuition and their skill and their just expertise in performing.
So, like, you mentioned that you kind of all loosely knew each other through the horror or fiction podcast community. Do you kind of have like an ongoing relationship with a lot of these actors, or is it more like a traditional, oh, we just cast in the community kind of thing?
Yeah, gosh, I'm trying to think. Some of our first actors were all people I had worked with before. You know, we have Nicole Goodnight, who I worked with very briefly on Creepy, because I edited a few episodes for John in the very early days. But yeah, it was, oh gosh, Russ Moore is another one of our iconic voices. He usually plays a soldier, usually a commanding soldier, and he very often dies. He's someone I had worked with on another show, Liberty, Tales from the Tower, which I had co-written for and co-edited a few episodes of. And I remember, like, gosh, probably a month or two before I actually started working on SCP in earnest, I had edited an episode with him in it, and I was like, wow, this guy has a really good voice. So I reached out to Travis and was like, hey, who is this dude? And he was like, oh yeah, it's Russ. And I just kind of had his email like tucked away, waiting for something like SCP to pop up. Because, you know, I've produced and I've directed a lot of shows, so like anytime I find an actor who's like, oh, you have a good voice, like, oh, you're really versatile, like I just kind of, you know, grow my list of contacts.
Yeah. I had the same thing.
But you know, when we first started up, it was a lot of people that I'd known or worked with, at least in some capacity before, or at least been like very adjacent to. But as we hit season 2, you know, we widened that net just a little bit more to bring in, you know, in SCP-1730, you'll actually hear the voices of a lot of community members who were just podcast listeners who were on our Discord, who were active and, you know, just wanted to be part of the show. So we've brought a lot of our, so we brought them in because ultimately SCP is a community project. So like we want everyone to be a part of it. But yeah, so we brought them in. I brought in new actors that I've worked with on other shows. And yeah, just open it up a bit more. So I think now we have a roster of like 26 people, almost 30.
It's impressive, yeah. It's kind of interesting to see
right.
the process of how you get these people. I think a lot of people just assume you do everything through like a casting network or something.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, there's been a few times I've opened up casting, which, you know, that's something we generally do very publicly. You know, we'll put it on our Twitter. We're putting on Casting Call Club, which is a great resource for voice actors. Our main pool of actors generally comes from the Audio Drama Hub, which if you're a podcaster or you want to get into fiction podcasting, go find the Audio Drama Hub on Facebook. It's basically where anyone who's interested in fiction podcasting or has expertise in it, it's where they go and they find actors, they talk through problems, they connect, they communicate. Yeah, it's basically like the cornerstone of the fiction podcast community worldwide.
Oh yeah, I actually never do. I've always kind of been in and out. Like my only experience with fiction podcasts is like a little bit of Welcome to Night Vale. I'm sure you hear that a million times.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's a niche of a niche because podcasting is, you know, a very new medium, and like it's growing pretty quickly year to year. I think gosh, I want to say like last year is up to like, you know, some 10-20 million people. The year before that it was only like 4 million. So like it's growing super quick, but it's still very small. And fiction podcasting, you know, until last year, wasn't even a category on like any podcast app. Like if you wanted to find,
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
yeah, like if you want to find Welcome to Night Vale or the Black Tapes or Archive 81, they were crammed into the arts category alongside like The Moth, which is like a loose kind of improv like
I've listened to
hour-long talk show. Yeah. Or they're with like film and theater reviews. Like it was just kind of a smorgasbord of like, this is kind of related to arts.
That's interesting. Yeah, I didn't realize it was. Because I knew it was always around. I mean, I in high school was Welcome to Night Vale was really started to like take off.
Yeah, that's what got me into it. I listened to Welcome to Night Vale in high school, and then in college I listened to the Black Tapes, and I was like, I bet I could make a podcast. So then I did, like a fool.
So that's really what kicked it all off.
Yep. But yeah, no, to your point, I think like you have shows like Welcome to Night Vale, which is to this day still like one of the biggest fiction podcasts out there. And that's really where most people get into it. Like I think a lot of people don't even know that like old radio dramas from the 50s have quite made the return that they have.
Yeah, actually I did hear about this kind of recently.
Yeah, and I mean, like, if you track it back a few years, like, the BBC has always done radio dramas. Obviously, America used to do it back in the 50s, but, when TV came into fashion, like, a lot of those radio plays fell out of favor, at least in America. Worldwide, and especially in Europe, like, they're still very persistent, a very active market. In America, it's kind of like reteaching people like, oh no, it's a movie without the video.
I think if anyone has free time, definitely. I had this old this local college radio station that like at like 1 a.m. on like Tuesday nights they would play old like radio dramas from like the 40s and 50s.
Hell
they're so fun. Like they're definitely very, very dated.
Oh yeah.
But there's something very charming and kind of fun about that.
Right. Anything by Orson Welles is wonderful. He went on to direct Citizen Kane, but he started with perhaps the most infamous War of the Worlds.
Yeah.
He did the radio drama that stopped the globe. But he also did a bunch of other stuff with what was the studio's name? Mercury Theater on the Air. And they did, The Stranger, which I think has been adapted and turned into maybe a Twilight Zone episode, if I'm not mistaken. But, that's basically you're driving along a highway late at night and you see a stranger on the side of the road. You pick him up. The classic, like, hitchhiker ghost story. And Mercury Theater is known for doing just a slew of other things, all of which you can find on YouTube or on last I checked they were all on Apple Podcasts, and I bet they probably still are. And it's just like the old archived audio, and it's a little grainy, but other than that, like, it's still pretty good.
Yeah, I know. I remember, I think the last one I was listening to was like a spy adventure story. And so I think the thing that I thought was super interesting was like, obviously they're like, this was like a globetrotting one, so they're going to different areas of the world. So every time there was a new scene, they always like had to get like a really, really exaggerated, like, for example, they were like, I think in some sort of like I think they were in Cairo, so they just start playing like the most stereotypical like Egyptian music, things like that, which is kind of fun.
No, absolutely. Yeah, and like those audio cues are totally still around today. It's modern podcasters rely a lot less on music, just because more of them tend to prefer sound effects. But if you listen to any current audio genre or fiction podcast, you will hear probably at some point the same like rustling of leaves or wind blowing through the treetops or bird chirp number 72, just these little audio cues to help you establish place and scene. and everything else like that. For SCP archives, probably our most commonly used and probably our most popular sound is we have an old cassette tape fast forwarding. So right before and right after an audio log plays, we'll have just like a click, zzz, and then another little click, and then we'll have like some person's voice come on with a lot of texture and kind of grain added to it to make it sound like old and a little warbly. So that way you may not know where they are, but they're on a tape being played for you.
Yeah, I kind of see it almost like as an establishing shot of a film or a TV show.
Exactly that.
Sets the mood.
Yeah, and to that point, sound design very much is like the visuals of this world. It is the director of photography. It is the framing shots that are beautifully well done. It is the over the shoulder that is suspenseful and creepy.
I mean, even with film, like this past year, I thankfully have someone on my team, Nick, who does all the sound design stuff, and it will make or break films, the sound design, and that's something that a lot of people aren't as aware of.
Oh yeah.
Usually they say with good sound design or good editing, you never notice it.
Exactly. And perhaps the most messed up thing is that rule is so true and perhaps even more prevalent in podcasting. Like you said, good sound design is something you'll never notice, and the moment you notice it is it's a train wreck. That's everything falling apart. When your entire show is only sounds, holy heck, you better make sure every sound is just right. Because if there is nothing more jarring or something that'll take you out of the scene more than a bird chirp that is too loud and like not quite right, or it can be hard finding sound effects that like sound realistic, because you don't want a real sound. If I want ice cracking, I'm not going to use the sound of ice cracking, because ice cracking is really quiet and really hard to find. Instead, I'm going to use plastic cracking, because it's a little over dramatic. But it more effectively conveys, something is cracking and breaking, and 5 decades of movies have programmed Americans to identify ice breaking as the sound of plastic creaking and breaking because of Foley in movies. Sound designers for visual very often don't use real sounds. They use synthetic noises that sound correct. Like there's a million movies and shows and interviews you can watch with Foley artists, but most commonly I think of someone who is doing something for Pixar where basically there's like a little lion club who had claws and they were climbing up a tree. So a man made a glove, tied some nails to the tips of his fingers, and found, I think it was a piece of sandpaper, and basically like scratched that, and then to like emulate the lion's mouth, he had gotten like, what was it? It was like a sheet of grass and like some water and basically and moved that around. Just these
that's crazy.
Right? Yeah, these really weird random combinations that you wouldn't think sound like whatever you're seeing, but do. It's all about the art of making something realistic sound more than realistic, because realistic noises just don't cut it, if that makes sense.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
Well, like for film, they always say like make your shot 200 times as exciting as you think it is, because like the camera is going to mute it and really make it half as exciting as you envision it would be.
Exactly. Yeah. Like there's so much you lose just in that translation.
There was a really interesting interview. I can't remember what the interview was, but it was about this Foley artist. I think he did some of the stuff for Batman, like Christopher Nolan's film. But basically, he was saying when he grew up, what really got him into Foley stuff is he would just carry like a tape cassette around, and he would just record sounds and try to like play this game. Okay, this is like, maybe this is a car engine popping, but this also sounds like this, and kind of playing this like mix and match kind of game. and then would just do edits on top of that. That kind of
Yeah.
played the tricks of the mind.
Oh yeah. Exactly. Yeah, and it's probably the biggest time sink whenever I edit an episode is just finding the right sound. So I have I think I'm up to 4 different sound libraries right now, and I'll kind of picture a noise in my head. Let's say it's what's something weird I had to do recently? Dismemberment. That's a fun one. I had a character whose arm got torn off and basically like popped out of its socket. And I spent probably a good hour just like going through different sound banks trying to find the right thing. And I think I ended up using a melon that was getting kind of like gutted for the wet squelches. And I had used wood being broken and kind of like cracking as a lot of the bone popping, and the wood popping I could also use for a fire. If I had a fire, you get those like distinct little pops of wood. Could have used it for that. I could have used it for ice cracking or breaking. I could have used it for a very suspenseful moment when someone is walking through the woods and they accidentally step on a twig. It's a very versatile sound. But then I add some wet mushing, and I add an actor's scream and a monster growl, and now suddenly it's dismemberment instead of a fire on top of an icy river, right?
Yeah, that's interesting how the context and what else it's played side by side with completely changes the sound and the meaning of it.
Yeah, and perhaps one of the biggest strengths to SCP as an audio format is every article is written with narration in mind. You have item number and special containment procedures and description and generally even in like your audio logs or in your like video logs, because the wiki is a text format, you'll have like little like italicized notes like, MTF Alpha 4 steps into this room and turns around and sees a mummified corpse, which saves me a lot of time as a sound designer because the narrator just told you that. So now I don't have to, have the actor like take a bunch of steps. I can have, a creak of the floor. I can have a turn of the heel. I can have a gasp, and that's all I need. And that can play under the narrator telling you what's happening. Which, as I'm sure in fiction, you're often told, like show, don't tell. But in fiction podcasting, you can get away with a little bit of telling, and you obviously don't want to overtell, and you still want to have those elements of showing. You still want to have your actors gasping and screaming and crying, but you can also narrate to them. You can tell them what's happening. You can, tell them like, you're coming into the room and seeing a corpse, you're falling through the floor, and you have some sound of like rocks falling and debris or whatever it is, and you can build these scenes with a lot of similar elements to influence like that sound isn't this, it's that, and this gasp isn't for this reason, it's for that reason, and you can play with and you can change that context with just a few simple words.
Yeah, so we're talking about the creative process a lot, and one of the things I want to ask you is, for people who have been getting interested in fictional podcasts, is there kind of like any general tips or advice that could save them pain getting in?
Yes. First, everyone will tell you it's a super accessible medium. And it's next to free, and they're kind of right. It is super accessible. It's not free. So expect to have to pay money, at least for a microphone. You're going to have to spend time writing a script, whatever that is. It's, and most importantly, it's not a get rich fast scheme. After 5 years, 5 years, I am just now starting to, generate income and make this more of a full-time job. It is a very long-term investment. That said, it's incredibly worthwhile because you have more freedom and more control, and more ability to try and fail and succeed at doing really crazy out there ideas, because you're not working with, a film budget, because you're not trying to mimic visuals, because humans are really good at, visuals and like what's right or wrong. Audio, it's a lot easier to trick humans into like thinking, oh yeah, that sounds correct. But yeah, be prepared for a long journey. But most of all, know that there is a very wonderful community, and if you tap into it and you reach out to other creators and you reach out to artists and actors, these are the people who will give you advice on how to edit your audio, on how to promote your show. They'll have you on their show. It's a very collaborative thing. And like I said earlier, I give my actors the script and I just kind of let them go with it. A lot of it is just having trust in your team and in your coworkers, and like I said, letting them run away with it. It's not my script and my sound design and my story. It is Tahoni's script and my sound design and my composer's music and my actor's interpretations and my narrator's intonation. It's a culmination of so many different little moving parts. And while a lot of my identity is in the show, ultimately it is a wholly unique thing created by many different people.
Yeah, I'm personally all about the whole collaborative creative process.
Yeah. And I went to school for writing, and I focused on stage writing, right? And one of the things I remember my teacher telling me is like, when you write not a screenplay, a stage play, very specifically a stage play, the only thing that won't get changed is the dialogue that the characters say. Everything else is fair game. So if you have stage notes about, Lucy entering from stage left, she might enter from stage right. She might enter from stage, back. Whatever works best for the set designer. You say it takes place in, 50s Chicago. Oh, well, now it's, 70s Delaware because the topics were appropriate for that. Or that's what the costume designer specialized in. The actors won't look like what you think they look like. The costumes will be different. The set will be different. Not even just from what you imagine, but from place to place. Look at, God, any stage play out there. But, like, the only thing that keeps, Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman the same is the words the actors say. Everything else changes. And you should be accepting and furthermore embrace that change, because it's a good thing. Because quite truthfully, I'm a full-time artist. I podcast full-time now. That's really cool and rad. But truthfully, I'm not that great of an artist. The thing that makes my show good is that I have all these other very incredibly talented people around me that, boost the performance and boost it. And, I contribute my part, and that's kind of all I can do. I have to rely on my actors to act. I have to rely on my composer to make beautiful, incredible music that's, fitting for a scene. I have to trust, if someone else is doing sound design that week, I have to trust them to correctly do sound design and to have their own interpretation of what cracking ice sounds like, Yeah,
I've just from personal experience, I've kind of found through trial and error, the idea of the one-man band is, you almost always get, there are those freaks, not freaks, but there's people out there that are the exception. But I find for the average normal person, it's just so much better. You end up enjoying it so much more, the process, if you pick your role that you're good at and you let your team fill in for all the things that you're a lot weaker at. Cover yourself,
Absolutely. Yeah. And, like I said, I generally, I think I've designated myself as the showrunner for SCP Archives because, I take care of the budget and I take care of the casting and I take care of the sound design for the show. And, I used to do a little bit more. I used to do more acting. I used to do more script finding. And, I've since been able to outsource most of that, which is great. And very often when you're first starting up, podcasting will ask you to wear a lot of different hats, at least, actor and editor, but oftentimes also the writer and the social media advertiser and, any, the graphic designer. I do a lot of our graphic design currently. So you'll have to wear a lot of different hats, but as much of that as you can share, share. It's the best thing you can do. Share it with your friends, share it with your coworkers, listen to other people's ideas. And I think that's probably the coolest thing about the SCP Wiki as a whole. It's all under Creative Commons Share Alike 3.0. Which means you can take an article from the website and you can cut a few lines of it. You can recast a character. You can turn it into an audio form. You could turn it into a movie. You could turn it into an animation. It's allows you to transform it. And I will say right here now, like I know we generally try and keep pretty original to the stories, and very rarely do we edit scripts because often we don't have to, but once in a while we do. Once in a while we'll cast a character who is male as female, and we'll change the pronouns, or we'll change some of their lines, or a little tweak here and there, and that's okay because it's a collaborative thing. It's okay to come in and transform and change it, and do what fits you best. For 1730, we condensed a lot of roles because I want to give my actors longer roles instead of a lot of different little short ones. So, now we have, an MTF team that's 3 people instead of 4. And, it may not be super duper faithful, but it is kind of in the spirit of collaborating and sharing and changing and transforming, Yeah,
I personally, especially because I used to do live action adaptations. I'm moving to animation now.
Right.
But with video, especially when you have budget restraints, I was even more forced to all right, I know this is how the story is on paper, but I really have to make some decisions here to make it work.
Right. Something is going to have to get cut, or, a prop's not going to be exactly the same.
Yeah. So it's I think most people nowadays in the SP community, they get it. I don't really get that many comments of this thing is off and this thing is off, because there's so many creators out there that I feel like they're just kind of here's my adaptation, here's my kind of version of it.
Right. And absolutely. And I mean, that's off the wiki, but think about on the wiki, there's not even one canonical hub. There's the Broken Masquerade, there's the Broken God, there's
exactly,
the Scarlet King, there's so many hubs, and they all work so well because you take a core principle, you could take a core idea, here's an article, parts of it are redacted, the only constant is that there is a foundation that has at one point captured this thing. And aside from that, you can change that idea and you can make it yours and you can make it unique, so you can have a story like Lamplight set a few thousand years in the future where humanity has colonized the galaxy and now lives on the far distant edge. You can have a story like 1730, which is about a foundation from a different dimension that gets teleported into our world and is hectic, to say the least. You can have 7 different interpretations of hell. You can have 8 different gods from different religions all fighting in space in the cosmos, and that collaboration, I think, is probably the reason the wiki is so popular and the reason the wiki has existed for so long, because anyone can come and have their idea, be true and be valid and, get shared, right?
It's a very interesting social experiment, the whole wiki.
Yes, it is.
And the fact that it lasted this long is just amazing, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the fact that it's only, started speeding up. It's not, slowing down by any means.
Yeah, it's not slowing down at all. Not at all. I think literally last year was like the biggest year by a long shot for the wiki, and also just the amount of creators that have been sprouting up.
Yeah.
Including me in the past 2 years, and you. That's one thing that's kind of interesting with the podcast. Since it's guest based, I'm finding new creators that are like blowing up on YouTube, on whatever social media site out there. Like every few months, it's like there's just someone new cropping up, which is it's exciting.
Right. And I mean, I'm a very strong believer in the Creative Commons. I think the more you share your work and the more you allow others to add to it, the better it'll be. As if the last 10 minutes haven't been obvious. But I think that's also what makes our community unique. You have companies like Disney who own, Star Wars and all of Marvel and everything else now, right? And, Star Wars is awesome. I could only imagine what it'd look like if, every person who loved Star Wars, and there's a fan fiction community, and that's almost there. But imagine, if, the average Joe could, make a Star Wars movie and post it on YouTube, you'd get a lot of really cool and really creative characters and universes and explanations for things, perhaps a better explanation for why the Force is the way it is. That's not bugs in your body.
Warhammer, they're kind of interesting as a company because they're very loose with their license. So that's just kind of made, I don't know if you know about Stardies, but he's this guy who made these extremely amazing high quality animations retelling some stories in that universe. Mm-hmm. And that's like a great example of just some random dude who just was super talented, and he just had probably some of the best animated single man animations I've ever seen. And Warhammer is it's cool because we're not like Disney where we're we'll ban hammer if you make a dime off of our property.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, obviously we're biased. We're both in the SCP community, so
yeah. No, I mean, I also look at other communities I don't know if you're familiar with the Metro franchise, like Metro 2033.
Yeah, I know the game. Yeah.
Yeah, it's basically Russian Fallout. But the cool thing about that is when it first started, the creator, Alex Skoloski, I'm probably butchering his last name. But he was just posting chapters on his website for free, and he'd started a forum, and he was like, "Hey, if you want to write a story set in the Metro, do it here. Write it here. Come and join this, collaborative fiction project with me." And now that's been turned into a video game franchise. There's some comic books. I believe there's a live action adaptation in the works, a shorter one. Yeah. But all these other cool things, and part of the popularity for that is because this guy was, I think he was 19, 20 when he started writing it, and he just opened up for everyone. Easy concept. Everyone in Russia, everyone in Moscow lives in the metro system because nukes fell. What happens next? And you play with that idea and you grow it and you expand it. And, it's a lot of fun.
That's cool. Yeah, I actually never knew it was that open, source.
Yeah. And I believe the universe itself still is. I believe the books are, a little more restriction because obviously they're his own creative works. But I believe the general Metro world itself is still in the Creative Commons.
That's awesome. I mean, so speaking of Creative Commons, this is a slight tangent, but I feel like I got to point this out. So
yeah,
in America, we have this thing called public domain, and the reason why public domain has been stuck since the 1910s is because of your boy Mickey Mouse, fucking Mickey Mouse.
Yep. So, goddamn Disney. Mm-hmm. I I have such a huge grudge against Disney for that fact alone. Aside from the fact that they're a media monopoly that has gobbled up every other industry in America. No, I hate that stupid mouse. But yeah, off of James's point, for folks who aren't familiar, oh god, what is copyright law in America now? It used to be like life plus like 50 years, which is what copyright and
not even it was even shorter.
But yeah,
they keep it's really complicated.
It's been expanded a few times. But yeah, in most modern European countries right now, it's like life plus 50 or life plus 70. So, the author lives, the author dies, their family has the ownership of that property, or maybe a company, depending on how it fell. And then 70 years after the author has died, it's released into the public domain. And that's how you get things like Sherlock Holmes, which is wildly popular because it's public domain. And anyone can make a Sherlock Holmes story. Perhaps too many people. Look at Elementary and the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes and the BBC Sherlock Holmes.
But hey, the more the merrier.
Exactly, right? And why not? Why not make a new Sherlock Holmes? Everyone knows Sherlock Holmes. He's so popular. The basics of the character is he's a detective. It's easy to work with that, right?
Yeah.
But Disney decided, fuck artists and fuck the Creative Commons and public domain. I realize I don't think I've cursed this entire episode right there.
No worries.
It's how much the stupid mouse boils my blood. But yeah, now it's like life plus 70 years plus like an additional 30 if he wrote it, or if the author wrote it for a company like Disney. So, if I don't know, James Cameron writes a new Avatar movie for Fox, which is now owned by Disney, that world won't enter the public domain until like another 130 years from now, assuming he dies in like 30 years, which he might. But yeah, like that's such a huge gap in the public domain. And as a lot of people might be aware, The Great Gatsby just came into the public domain this year. Last year, 2020, maybe it was 2019. That was the first year in like 4 decades that anything entered the public domain.
It's ridiculous.
Which is, it's crazy. That said, we are starting to get a lot of really boppin' like jazz and country music from the 1920s, like entering the public domain. Oh man, it's so good.
What's frustrating is like if they didn't keep extending this, there'd be some great songs from the 40s and 30s that we'd have access to right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, there's just like even 50s. There's so many great like Frank Sinatra songs, Louis Armstrong, and it just literally just because of a mouse, we don't have access to these things.
Right, and I think there's inherently this idea that if you create something, it's yours, and you want it to be yours. Obviously, you and I, we work in film and audio, and those tend to be very collaborative because of actors and because of, stage managers and filmmakers and everything else. But let's say you're a novelist like Stephen King. Obviously, he sat down and he wrote those 400 pages over the course of a year or whatever it was, right? And yeah, of course, you're going to have a deep sense of ownership and pride over that because you made it, and that's cool. But at the same time, it's like, well, if someone loves the thing you made, if someone really loves Mickey Mouse, like, why not just let them draw Mickey Mouse? Why not let them make their own fan comic or a short film or a t-shirt line? Why not share? I think that's kind of what it comes down to, is like, it's just the idea of like, oh no, this is my ball. You can look at it, but that's it.
Well, especially after the creator's been dead for so long. It's just, to me,
it's like, right, like, listen, if I'm dead, I don't care what you do with fucking anything I've made, You can, even my bones, dig them up and like put them on display somewhere. Like, come on.
Oh, man.
Now, I've secretly committed myself to, by the time before I die, I'd like to commit the few works that I've made so far to the public domain, which, right now as a low budget podcaster who is, worked on one big Creative Commons project and a few other private ones, like Clarity and Margaret's Garden, and there's 5 other shows that I've made that I don't want to think about. But I would love for those worlds to exist, and I would love for other creators to come and make things in this world. I was very fortunate early on in my career. Lake Clarity very quickly caught on with a lot of fiction podcast listeners, and it was pretty popular at the time. And we received fan fiction from just someone who listened to the show and had interacted with us on Tumblr and Twitter a few times. It was called Cheesy Fears, and basically it was the entire gang was making I had 5 characters. They're all teens. They go into the woods and die, because that's what happens in horror, right? But this was set up as basically they were all together and they were watching a horror movie about a cheesy Cthulhu-like monster, and that Cthulhu-like monster came through the TV, so then there was all these little slices and blocks of cheese flying around killing them. So we had cheesy bats that were clawing at their hairs, and some cheese that got in their throats and choked them. And basically everyone had these really bad cheesy deaths.
Wow.
And there's a bunch of cheese puns in it, and it's the stupidest, silliest thing ever. And it is perhaps my favorite Lake Clarity thing ever, and it's the only thing in Lake Clarity that I didn't make or write myself, or with the help of friends, right? It was just someone wrote this and gave it to me, so I rounded up the entire cast and I made them record it.
Wow, that's great.
Oh man, and it's again single-handedly the sole best thing to come out of the entire Lake Clarity world that I crafted is this weird cheesy fan fiction. Oh man, it's so good.
Yeah, I mean, I think the counter argument to all of this is that when the artists,
it's money.
Well, money definitely, but I think when the author's alive, their idea is they only want a very specific version of their world, and they don't want other people just changing the narrative or the lore of that world.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And listen, yeah, if you made something and I wanted share the stuff I make, that's just for me. If you make something and you want to hold on to it, yeah, do it. But it doesn't need to, in my opinion, it doesn't need to go on at least 100 years after you die.
No, I'm all with you on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Let someone else take a turn. You're dead now. What's the matter to you? Your bones.
I want to ask you about this a little bit.
Yeah.
Just briefly, what kind of other things have you done outside of the SCP universe?
Oh man. All right, let's see. So currently I'm working on another show called Margaret's Garden, which is it's very SCP adjacent, and if you like SCP, I think you'd feel right at home. It's 2 agents from a mysterious government bureau are sent to investigate this small town called Everton. 50 years ago, everyone from Everton just vanished overnight, and it's one of those great kind of unsolved mysteries. Well, flash forward to today, something happened, and basically everything in the 10-mile areas outside of Everton suffered a major blackout, which is kind of weird. So these 2 agents get sent in, check it out, make sure everything's okay. And they get sucked into a strange energy rift that pulls them from our world and sucks them into another dimension of ideas and thoughts and fantasy, almost, right? So they find themselves in a sort of astral plane where they encounter the remnants of a failed human society. strange shark rhino creatures that run a motel, lizard things, something called tithers that are terrifying, and I think scorpion-like. It's not really clear, but they are quite sharp and metallic and robotic, and they do come and kill the small baby astral creatures that still exist. And a bunch of other weird stuff, all in search of Margaret, because Margaret has gone missing, kind of. Yeah, it's basically a 10-episode exploration log of a really weird SCP. But yeah, it's threshold fiction, portals and stuff. There's horror, there's some fantasy elements, and there's a lot going on, and it's a fun mystery.
That's a really cool premise. I like that.
Yeah, we're on episode 5 right now, and we release a new episode every other week, every other Thursday. So yeah, you can catch the first half of the show now, and our finale airs on, I want to say, April 7th? The first Thursday of April. So yeah, check it out, listen to it, it's a fun time. It's really weird. Before that, I've also worked on, I mentioned Lake Clarity, which was my first fiction podcast, which I wrote back in 2016. That's about 5 teens who go up to a supposedly cursed campsite, and terrible things happen to them. After that, I worked on a show called Aftershocks, which is about a girl, Riley, who has schizophrenia, and the purpose of this show was to have a show where someone with a mental health condition could be the hero of their own story. So we spent a lot of time researching schizophrenia specifically, and finding a way for it to work in our story, and being very respectful of it. Same with one of our characters has Tourette's in that story, so we wanted to also represent that in a way that was realistic, and not like, oh, haha, you said a funny word because you have Tourette's, but a realistic interpretation of that. Because again, it's very rare that you have a character with Tourette's in media that isn't just kind of a gag, right?
Yeah, and the fact that most Tourette's isn't even like that.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, so the whole idea was to have a show where there's mental health and horror, where the person with the mental health condition wasn't the monster or the serial killer, but was the hero of the story. And it's a ghost story, and it's really fun. That was way back when, but that was written by one of the co-creators of Lake Clarity, Vin Ernst, who is an incredible fiction podcaster and writer. After that, let's see, I worked on a show called The Enoch Saga, which was the audio drama adaptation of a book, which I need to finish, and I promise I will someday. We're about halfway through the book, and we came to a stopping point for other projects. And then I've worked on a bunch of other fiction podcasts. I've worked on Liberty, Tales from the Tower, which is a far future sci-fi horror show. Basically, there's a city on a planet. Inside the city, it's this kind of totalitarian government. Outside, it's like Mad Max style raiders and cannibals. It's really cool. It's really fun, far future sci-fi. Let's see, I've worked on some of the mini seasons for White Vault, which is a horror story set in the Arctic Circle. It's set in Svels. Oh god, am I gonna butcher that? Svelsbog? I'm so sorry, folks who live near there. But
that's the Norway, right?
Yep. Yeah, northern Norway. But yeah, like I said, it's in the Arctic Circle. Basically, a small team of expeditionists is sent to repair this radio station, and things go wrong, as they do. it's an incredible show. They're currently on their 4th season, and it's a lot of fun. Like I said, I helped edit one of their side seasons, White Vault's Artifact, which I think aired between season 1 and season 2, if I'm correct. And that's White Vault and Liberty are both made by Fool and Scholar, which are some incredible audio fiction people. They just make like the best of the best fiction podcasts, and you need to check them out. Yeah, and then aside from that, I've worked on a bunch of other shows, done some acting here and there. If you get really into like fiction podcasting, especially stuff that's like 1 or 2 years old, you'll probably hear me pop up in a few places.
Wow, you've been around.
Yeah. I was very fortunate that I started fiction podcasting when I was in college. And one of my jobs was on campus as I worked off campus like on the weekends at a restaurant. But during the week, Monday through Friday, I worked on campus as a journalist in the student media office, which meant I was an editor for our weekly newspaper. And then after that, I was an editor for our art magazine, and then I was in radio for a bit. But really what that meant is like I sent people out on assignments, and then Monday and Tuesday of my week was a terrible nightmare where I was up until 2 a.m. every day, like working on the newspaper, doing layout and stuff. And then the rest of the week, I just kind of got paid to sit around the office. So I just, did a lot of
like my
podcast stuff. Yeah. So, I just got involved. I acted where I could. I edited. I just did anything I could to like, break into the community and, also learn, because when I first made Lake Clarity, I had never made a podcast before. I'd never, worked in a radio station or used a booth or anything like that. So it was all a learning experience. So it was like, hey, let me come edit your show. I have Adobe Audition. I have some sound effects that I think are kind of cool. And, I'll spend 4 or 5 hours, editing your, 10, 20-minute episode, making it sound nice and pretty, just so I could practice, because I could only write and direct so much, and I wanted more and more audio. I was like, well, the best way to do this is just reach out and say like, hey, can I edit an episode for you? Or like, hey, can I do this thing for you? And then, through working with a bunch of people, I got my start. I learned how to edit pretty decently, I hope. We're a pretty, SCP Archives is a pretty popular show, so I think people like my sound design, or perhaps better yet, maybe they haven't even noticed it, which I think is probably the best I could hope for. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it was just all about, like I said, I was in college. I wanted to learn how to do these things. So I spent a lot of time just struggling through them, trying to figure it out.
I think that's one of the best ways to learn too. I mean, that's kind of why I did the YouTube channel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to get more like on the grounds.
Right.
Just experience. Just doing it and learning as you go.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the best way to learn, is just to start, right? Just pick it up. Because before I did any audio, I had done, films and video stuff in high school. So it was a bit of a weird transition to me, because I was so used to like, thinking about and writing for visuals, right? And now I'm transferring into this world where there are no visuals. Fortunately, Adobe Audition is very similar to Adobe Premiere. So if you know one, you kind of know the other. You can kind of stumble your way through it.
Nope, yeah, they're very similar.
Yeah. There's a splice feature. That's really all you need, honestly. But yeah, it's just, spending time and learning things that you care about and like, in later years of college, I dabbled in a very small amount of like video game stuff and design, just some very like basic levels. My senior thesis was making a very short choose your own adventure is a copywritten term. So it was a choice-based story adventure.
Wow.
Yeah, if you're ever on like itch.io, which is like a nice little marketplace for a lot of small games, choose your own adventure is no longer a tag. I think it's like choice-based games are, because choose your own adventure is very active about protecting that copyright and has I think they sued Netflix for Bandersnatch because
Wow.
in one of their marketing materials they're like, oh yeah, you can choose your own choices or adventure. It's like just close enough that it's like, choose your own adventure. That's ours. So give us money. And I think they won, if I'm not mistaken, too.
Stories like that just remind me of like Gene Simmons trying to copyright the word orange juice.
Yeah, or like Bethesda trying to copyright Scrolls. I don't even remember that.
But, what were you saying right before the copyright stuff? I just completely derailed me. It just triggers me.
Always copyright. Creating Adobe Audition. I worked on some video game stuff.
I'm actually learning Unreal now, actually.
Unreal is so much fun, and the blueprints are the best gosh darn thing I've ever had to work with. I hate C#. I hate C# so much. So yeah, I made a little prototype side scroller in Unreal, and it took me like 3 hours. It's crazy how good that engine is.
I'm using it for film reasons and also virtual live streaming.
Oh yeah, no, it's awesome,
and it's insane. I literally was able to set up live on one model. I was able to set up live face capture and live body motion animation, which was like,
hell yeah.
It took me a week to figure it out, but because there's there's a lot. I'm not getting into it, but there's basically normally the way you do it is by buying all these expensive programs, and I'm like, I'm not doing that.
Right. Yeah. Unreal's free, and it can do anything you want it to do.
So we are nearing the end of the podcast, but before we wrap it up, is there any last things you want to chat about or things you want to shout out?
Definitely go check out Margaret's Garden. It's a lot of fun. It's really weird. Like I said, it's like SCP, but if SCP had a narrator that was like really tongue-in-cheek about it, think like Lemony Snicket.
Okay.
Yeah. So, SCP meets Lemony Snicket meets like weird, mucked up fantasy realm. Everything's so bad. It's, I love it. Aside from that, SCP Archives Season 3 coming March 9th. I don't know when this episode will air exactly. I imagine it's probably before March 9th. If it's after, Season 3 is out and you should listen to it. And otherwise, check out the Bloody Disgusting Podcast Network. It's a wonderful place to get all of your horror news. We have SCP Archives on the network. We have Creepy, which is all your favorite creepypastas and no-sleep stories, with wonderful, incredible narration and sound design. We have Boo Crew, which is interviews with every horror icon you could think of. And Horror Queers, which is, in-depth analysis of LGBTQ horror films. And there's a bunch of other shows on the network. They're all amazing. Check them out. That's at bloody-disgusting.com /podcast. Or you can just go to bloody-disgusting.com or bloody-disgusting.com and find everything.
I'll try to throw a link in the description for you guys listening on YouTube.
Yeah, like I said, lots of cool stuff. If you like horror, it's literally all I do every day is make horror stuff and help other people make horror stuff.
Cool. Check it out, guys.
But yeah, that's it. That's me.
Thanks for coming on. It was cool to kind of chat about copyright and also kind of the history of radio. It was a fun turn.
Yep. Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. And Yeah, stay tuned, folks. There's wonderful show, lots of great stuff. If you haven't listened to Tony's episode, it's really cool. I listened to it actually right before it came on. Solid episode.
All right, well, thanks, folks. We'll see you next time. Thank you again, Pacific, for coming on. That's that.
All right, have a good one.